welcome to The Debate. Joining us in the studio are Emma Hayes and Matt Upson. And tonight, we're talking Europa League, where Chelsea won in Prague and Arsenal beat Napoli at home. Plus, we're talking top four in the Premier League and who will secure the last two spots. The race for the title resumes on Sunday. Liverpool can't afford to slip up against Chelsea, but will they? City are in pole position, but what impact will that loss to Spurs in the Champions League have on them? And the battle at the bottom continues this weekend with a huge game between Burnley and Cardiff, but who will handle the pressure best? You can get in touch with all your thoughts and questions. We want to hear from you at Sky Sports PL using the hashtag #TheDebate. So first up, we are going to be speaking about Chelsea, and the first question goes to you, Emma, because an away win, 1-0 in the end, Slavia Prague. How happy will Maurizio Sarri be with that win?
Well, I think for any manager going away in Europe with a clean sheet at this stage of the competition is where he wants. And knowing that he's made the changes that he's made tonight with such a big game coming up at the weekend, I think it's a perfect result for Chelsea. When
you look at the team that he left on the bench, the players that he left on the bench, he has rotated quite a lot in this competition anyway. Kante, Higuain, Hazard, Loftus-Cheek, Luiz all on the bench. How seriously is he taking this competition now?
Very seriously, because he's entered into the quarterfinals in the same phase of how he's approached it from the start, and to be in this position and to go away from home and win, like Emma said, just shows you that he's approaching it in the right manner that's right for Chelsea Football Club at the moment. And I think a draw away from home tonight would have been a good result, but that's an excellent result for Chelsea.
We've seen a lot of pressure on Maurizio Sarri lately from the fan base. Do you feel that at the moment, with results in the Premier League and also this result tonight, that public opinion is slightly changing?
Well, I think results help in our business, and the reality is that Chelsea have found consistent performance. And I think the blooding and the integration of younger players, in particular Callum and Ruben Loftus-Cheek to the team, I think has really helped and given the squad even more depth. I think it's fair to say throughout the season he has utilised the squad in both campaigns, in the European competition and the domestic competition. But Chelsea, let's not forget, are in the business of competing for trophies at the season end, at the end of the season, every year. So, we are a club that know how to do this, and we're in a strong position at the moment.
We just mentioned about bloody new talent and rotating players and perhaps public perception of Maurizio Sarri, but we see lately Ruben Loftus-Cheek getting starts and also Callum Hudson-Odoi's first start in the Premier League. We have had a tweet in actually that somebody's asking whether they think that actually if he'd have done this sooner it might have been a little bit better. You can see it now on your screen. What do you think?
For me personally, yes. I think it's a key feature for Chelsea as a football club moving forwards to give their young players a pathway to play and to make themselves icons at the club. And I think, you look at past successful periods at Chelsea as a team, I think they've had that. I think the fans have had that to look at and to celebrate. And yes, I believe the more and maybe the sooner that could have been done, the better. It's a club with a lot of good young talent, and it'd be good to see them play more in the first team.
Well, I think it's important to get that balance though, because at 18 years of age his body's maturing, and going from youth football into senior football week in, week out, as we've seen with the way I think Mourinho managed Rashford. It's being able, Hudson-Odoi has played more games than any other 18-year-old in the Premier League this season in terms of coming through. I think it is time, and the quality and talent is there at Chelsea, and now it's proving that the opportunities are coming their way.
I think I agree with you on the physical side of it, but there's also giving him that responsibility and growing. And I think starting a Premier League game like he did midweek, just doing that alone is a big step for a young player. And I think, it's more about the actual confidence and the development of their belief that they're going to play at that level than maybe it is a physical thing. And I think the more opportunities they can get to start him in big games and to give him that feeling, I think it's going to help him develop even more.
And there's another player at Chelsea who has been left out this season. We haven't seen much of him lately at all. And it's Danny Drinkwater. We know obviously he's been in the press this week, been charged with drink driving. But the discussion has moved on slightly as well, because Maurizio Sarri came out with these quotes. I'm going to read you them. He's not suited to my system and my way of playing. I told him everything in August. He appreciated but decided to remain, and so he knew very well the situation. So he's told him to go out and look for something else, but the player wanted to stay. What was your initial reaction when you heard those quotes?
Well, I think the manager's clear about what he's looking for in the style of play, and it's not always what a player wants to hear in that situation. And I don't think Drinkwater's career at Chelsea has gone the way perhaps he would have wanted. But the realities are the manager has been put in that position to select players that he feels is best suited to bring success to the club. And, I think for both the player and the club, they have to consider what that will look like at the end of the season, because otherwise Danny Drinkwater's going to go through 2 years of his career of not playing a lot of football. And I think perhaps that's what's got to be his priority from here on in.
How unhealthy is this situation when you've got a player that can play but isn't suited and isn't favoured by the manager? He's on a lot of money and he's not playing. Can it cause unhealthiness behind the ranks, like behind the scenes?
I think it is. It's an unhealthy thing, full stop. There's not a lot of winners in that situation. I can understand how the move came about. Danny Drinkwater had an excellent season with Leicester and won the title. I can understand why he would have an appetite to go to a club like Chelsea. So, as a player, you have these opportunities maybe only once in your career. So, to grab it with both hands is probably the right move for him. But so it hasn't worked out. It didn't work out under Conte either, really, did it? I know he's had a worse season this season in terms of appearances. But it is then difficult to sometimes manufacture that move away, given the circumstance of his position. And, we were saying a little bit earlier about how difficult it can be for players when they're out of favour, they're on good contracts, but that next move or that exit out of the club has to be right. You have to go into the right environment without playing solidly for 2 years that can support you to get back to playing well, because it's not a tap. You don't just kind of turn it on and off from being out of the team for 2 years and all of a sudden you rediscover that form in 3 matches. It takes a bit of time sometimes. Yeah,
especially you've got to find, as I say, a system. You think about it, under Conte, you had Kante being a pivotal player, and under this manager, it's Jorginho. It's been difficult because of the quality of the players that are at Chelsea. So I think consideration for that next move will preoccupy most of his time.
I think there's a question mark over the fit for him at Chelsea, given, he had an excellent season, but it was a very unique style of football that Leicester won the Premier League. It was very direct, it was high tempo, he was playing great passes in behind, very early balls round the corner for Vardy over the top, and, you don't really see Chelsea playing in that style. So I think, that was maybe a detriment to him coming into the club.
Especially while Fabregas was there.
For sure.
I think when you got a player like Fabregas, Da Costa, I think that partnership was significant. And I think if you don't hit the ground running, or you don't get yourself into a positive position, like you said, you go 2 years without a game, it then gets even harder to get into the team. And, that's unfortunate. But that is football. It happens. And I think for him, it's trying to find the right solution, and that may take time for it to get to that.
How might he be feeling? Because it's obviously clear to everybody else that he's not favoured by Sarri because he hasn't featured. But Sarri coming out and being quite vocal with what he's saying, how might that make Danny Drinkwater feel?
Well, I think that because he's had this conversation with him personally, then you already know your stance. I mean, whether or not it needs to be said publicly, that's the manager's choice. I don't think anyone didn't know that beforehand because he hasn't featured. So, it's not a nice feeling, but the reality is everyone can see he's not playing. The manager's had the conversation, been up front with him, which is the most you can ask for, I might add. I think that's a good thing that the manager can come to you and say that. It can only put you in a positive position, and doubt is the worst thing, or frustration in that situation. If you're clear about why you're not playing, and then it's up to you to try and forge a path out, then it kind of puts the ball in your court a little bit, which I think, what Maurizio Sarri's trying to do.
This all happens in the backdrop, of course, with this transfer ban that may or may not happen. At the moment, they've lodged an appeal. That was today. If it's not lifted, it'll be a 2-window transfer ban. Can they afford to have unused talent like that?
What is this Chelsea night, is it?
It is, isn't it? It's Chelsea section.
Yeah, well, I think whatever happens regarding a transfer ban, I think it's fair to say that if the appeal is successful or not, the club are best placed to manage that arrangement, because we have several young players and loan players across the globe that will be given opportunity as a result of that. But I think that process has to happen first before it's not a foregone conclusion that it is. And I think until that's resolved, then Chelsea have to just compete for the trophies they're in right now and recognise that there are a group of players beyond the current squad that are capable to come in, and perhaps this will be an opportunity for the club so that other players will be able to progress through coming back from loans or through our youth system that perhaps might not otherwise get the opportunity to play.
And that is it. If you're going to look for a positive in a situation like this, should it happen, it is that there are such a big squad and all these young players out on loan that could be recalled and be given the chance.
I absolutely think it's possibly one of the best things that could happen for Chelsea at the moment. You know, I think it could be a really positive thing for exactly those reasons you've just mentioned. And, you know, creating a pathway at a football club for a young player. And I know that there are players in and around the squad getting some game time, but you know, to get really established into a team and become a dependable, focused, you know, member of that team, that starting 11 week in, week out, I think it's so important for young players.
Well, look at Tottenham. I mean, arguably, I'm sure Tottenham fans won't appreciate me saying this, but Tottenham have been in their own transfer ban for 2 transfer windows. Technically, well, they haven't, but they haven't purchased players. And then you see the young players progressing through there. They're still in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, top 4 at this current time, and done that without buying a single player. Now, you know, it can be done at Chelsea.
Yeah, but the biggest thing is the manager, isn't it? You know, when you look at that, one of the biggest things for that to happen is the manager. And Pochettino is more than happy to work and develop young players while trying to win something. And I know people will say, well, he hasn't won anything. And fair enough, you know, at this moment in time you can say that. But I think it's so important to get that balance right. And maybe Spurs haven't quite been able to have that balance right. The stadium and other things have had a different financial focus for them. But Chelsea have had the opportunity to do that right. And I don't think they quite have done it. So maybe this ban could maybe force them to have a bit more balance and to look into the academy and the young players that they have.
All right, elsewhere in Europe this evening, Arsenal. Well, we're going to move on from Chelsea now, so you can have a little bit of a breath and we talk about somebody else in London as well. A good win for Arsenal, but is it enough?
Well, that's a great question. Matt and I was talking about my own team playing in the Champions League, 2-0 up from the home leg against Paris, went away and were hanging on for dear life until the last 5 minutes of the game. 2-0, as we know, most dangerous scoreline in football. And I think considering the chances they've missed tonight, it's going to be a tricky tie going away. So I'm not sure if it is, to be honest.
He set up with a very strong team. When we saw the team sheets and big players in there, he obviously wants to go and go far in this competition, potentially win it. He's got a lot of experience as well in this competition. Do you think he feels more comfortable in this ground than in the Premier League?
Maybe. Maybe he does. Maybe he does feel that. I kind of feel that there were some changes that, you know, the game at Everton at the weekend, there were some changes that were imposed on them due to illness, players not being quite fit. Koscielny maybe can't play the Sunday, then the Thursday. You know, various different things rumbling away. But when you look at that team in the Premier League that started, and then you look at the team that started tonight, for me there's a significant difference in terms of the quality and how good that starting 11 is.
But then you've got to add the home and the away factor, because
Absolutely.
that is the biggest problem for Arsenal. It's not Emirates, it's away from home.
Totally, and it's getting the players on board to be able to play away from home. Kolasinac, Ozil, you know, these type of players who at home for me do absolutely, you know, can do brilliant things at times. So, you know, 2-0 with Arsenal's away form and how they are. And just the opportunities they had tonight. Now, it could have been 4-0.
I think the thing is, what you don't realise, it's the crowd and the influence the crowd has and the type of game, and if it's a hostile environment and they concede early, it will be a tricky evening, and that will be on the back of playing a tough Premier League game at the weekend.
How do you, in your experience, if you've got teams that are struggling on the road, how do you fix that? How do you change? Is it a mentality thing that they're struggling?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to set the team up to be in a position to not only perform but produce the type of performance that's required away from home.
He's tried to do that, in fairness to him, hasn't he? I mean, he really has tinkered with formation, especially away from home.
There's no doubt, but I think if you're playing Ozil, Mkhitaryan away from home in the same side where you know that it's a difficult place to go, Everton, and I think your chances of being successful are lower. You then leave your best player out in Ramsey, and I think that their struggle, I think being able to put on enough creative influence but be steely enough in the right situations, I think getting the balance right is something that I think he's struggled with away from home, not at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think from this game there are other changes that maybe force that hand, but I agree. I think that he hasn't found, or perhaps he has found, and he is learning from which players can do the role that he wants them to do away from home.
I also think it's his first time going away to Premier League grounds, and you learn a lot, learn which ones, you know, some players really struggle at versus others, and there is a learning curve that goes with that. And Will they do enough to get enough away wins, both in Europa League and the Premier League? That's the question.
Let's have a little look then at the top six as it stands at the moment, because there is this race for the top four. There are only two places really that are up for grabs, and you can see how it looks at the moment. Chelsea on 66 and Tottenham on 64, closely contended. Arsenal on 63 and Manchester United on 61. Why don't we focus on Chelsea for a second?
Let's do it. Why not?
Let's do it, Emma. And we'll have a look at their run-in as well, because actually it's not necessarily an easy run-in. I mean, are there any easy run-ins anyway? But do you see them being able to do this and get to
Yes.
a top four position?
Yes, I do. I think we have to talk about the club who used to being in this position. You know, they're accustomed for competing for trophies at the business end of the season. And even though there have been, at times, difficult circumstances with a new manager, they're third in the league. And they're arguably going to progress to the semi-finals of the Europa League and been in the final of a Carabao Cup. Well, that's considered a bad situation in the eyes of those outside. But for me, we're in a strong position inside the club. And I think they've got the experience and they've got the know-how. And I think blooding the likes of Callum and Ruben at the right time, Giroud, I think, has done well, especially in the Europa League. And I think there's enough quality in that group for the team to make the top four.
It's not just Chelsea that we want to focus on. We're going to focus on the other three teams in contention as well and just have a little look at their run-in. So starting with Chelsea, Liverpool away, Burnley at home, followed by Manchester United away, Watford at home, and then the last game of the season in the Premier League is Leicester away. When you look at these fixtures, Matt, where do you think they're going to pick up points?
Oh, I think you can look at the obvious ones. You know, you'd have to say Burnley at home. Watford can be a very, indifferent game at times, but you fancy them with Watford and with Leicester, and the other two matches are massive. You know, Liverpool away this
Except
weekend.
you mentioned their previous form. I mean, they've been unbeaten in the last 8 games.
What I will say is that they seem a far stronger team than what they were before Christmas for me, and I think the adversity that they've been through, especially the League Cup final and all of that, I think the managers actually come through it a bit stronger. And I think they're actually better than what they were. That type of problem, which looked like it could be the end, has now actually strengthened them, and they've come through the other side a little bit.
Let's look at Spurs then, because there's some big fixtures that stand out there. City, they also have them to play in the Champions League, the second leg as well. Also, West Ham can be a little bit of a banana skin too.
Well, I'm going to eat my words and put my hat out and say Tottenham will not lose at their new stadium. I think the atmosphere inside their new home. So that's 12 points for me. Bournemouth away. Tottenham's got a good record away at Bournemouth, so I can see that. And it's Tottenham going to win 3 games in a row against Man City. No, they've won one of the 3. I think if they could qualify for the Champions League semi-final and lose the league game, I think Spurs fans will take that.
We spoke about Arsenal as well. I mean, none of the top 6, you saw it there, they're not facing any of the top 6. But it's not really that it's a concern, it's the away record in the Premier League.
Well, I think have they got 4 on the bounce?
They've got 4 away games out of the 6.
Yeah, 4 out of the 6. And that, to me, is a problem. Like you say, Ace, it's not so much about who they're playing, it's just their away form. And maybe, matches like the Everton one, an away game at Napoli, I think will maybe help them figure out, or the manager figure out, who is the best player, what is the best personnel, because I think he kind of knows the shape. It's just about picking the right character to go and get a result at any different stadium. And if you can get that right, then they're in with a shout.
Manchester United, if you just saw there, potentially on paper has the most difficult run-in. West Ham, Everton, City, Chelsea, Huddersfield and Cardiff. It gets a little bit easier towards the end there. They've also got to play Barcelona again in the second leg of the Champions League. The form has dipped slightly at the moment after Ole signed his official contract and he was permanent manager. What do you make of their performances recently?
Well, I think he's doing the best with the group that he's got, and I think you're only as good as your players, and that's the reality. I mean, watching them the other night against Barcelona, interestingly setting up, in a 3-5-2 and defending well and congesting the central areas, but still didn't do enough, I felt, to trouble Barcelona. They're going to go away to the Nou Camp and do it. Well, the game's only 1-0, so they're still in it. I think the problem they're going to face is that to find wins from a position where they're already 3 points outside of the top 4, knowing they've got City, which I think they have to win, Chelsea, massive, massive game for them. And ultimately, I think it's Everton away. I think that will be the defining end of their season, and then sandwiched between that, obviously, the Barcelona game. But I think it will be really, really tough for United to make it.
Different to what you kind of say maybe 3-4 weeks ago. It was like they had a head of steam, and they looked like they couldn't lose a game if they tried. But
what's changed?
What's changed? I don't think that I don't think the impact, the bounce that you get as a new manager lasts forever. I think it's a temporary thing, and I think that happened. And to all credit to the manager and to his team for getting the players in that mindset to go out and perform and win matches. I think ultimately you're going to hit some kind of dip. I think there's some unrest with players in terms of what's happening next season.
Goals are drying up.
Absolutely, but also like what you said earlier, I don't think their squad is that strong in terms of the quality. I think they've got a lot of players, have spent a lot of money, but when you look at the squad and the players, especially defensively, I just don't think they're.
You wouldn't have
as
predicted even last night. Luke Shaw going left-sided centre back in a back three with Fred in front, Pogba and McTominay, who was outstanding for United. Yeah. I think they're struggling, and even in the wide areas with Ashley Young, I think they need more strength and depth. Yeah. They need to strengthen in the summer, which sounds ludicrous considering how much investment there's been in the past 2 seasons. But they're going to need to if they're going to kick on. I think if they achieve the top 4, then fair play, because I think that is a significant recovery from them from Christmas.
I'm going to ask you both a difficult question, and tell me who you think will be the 2 that will secure top 4.
Well, I'm going to say a team that I really think will be in the top 4, and that's Spurs. Mm-hmm. I think Spurs, out of all of them, are, for me, the favourite to achieve. Just looking at their fixtures, and they're going to get a bounce. Well, they've had a bounce and a good feeling with their new stadium. I think they've waited a long time. It's been a big thing for them, and it's a fabulous place. And I think, I agree with Emma that I don't think they're going to lose a home game, or they're going to win all 4 home games. Yeah. It's going to see them through.
So Spurs is one.
Yep.
Who's the other?
Over to you.
Definitely Chelsea.
You divided them.
Definitely Chelsea. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and not back my club. I think Chelsea are in a good run of form, rich run, which has seen them, win quite a lot on the bounce, and I think they're in a good position. And I think one step away from the semi-final of the Europa League. My money's on Chelsea and Tottenham.
Right, there we go. Thank you very much, guys. Time for a quick break. But afterwards, we are speaking the title race, and in particular, Liverpool and their big match-up this weekend, plus loads more on the debate.
And Demba Ba's in here. Out comes Mignolet, but Bar punishes of all people Steven Gerrard. It's a terrific moment for Chelsea, but an awful one for the Liverpool skipper.
Yeah, memories of that event in 2014 may just rear their ugly head this weekend, where Liverpool host Chelsea once again in the Premier League. Matt, will that still be in their minds, do you think?
I don't think so. I think it's a distant memory. I think, the need and the desire for Liverpool to win the Premier League is a big thing. I'm sure that's in their minds. But failure and slip-ups or anything like that, I don't think is part of the psychology or the mentality of the Liverpool team or the manager. I think they're very focused on what they want to do. I think they're high intensity. I think he's got a real good balance this season on the energy. They look relatively fresh given the amount of games they've played at such an intense pace, and I think they're in good shape.
What about Chelsea? Because that was obviously a big win for them that day, but do you think any of their players will be thinking this is our chance to derail Liverpool once again?
No, I think Chelsea will be focused on trying to qualify for the top 4, and perhaps previous history at Anfield might come into play for the players. But beyond that, I think it's just about staying on top of what their ambitions are.
Isn't that the great thing about this Premier League at the moment? I think it's that, because you can look at all these head-to-heads in big areas and you think, well, they just want to... No, each team's got their own individual goal that
it's
they
like
really
3
need to go and
mini-leagues
succeed.
this year. It feels like there's the top half, at the middle of the table that's battling for 7th, and then those looking to remain in the Premier League. But I think it's had a knock-on effect with Europe. I think the quality of performances from teams in all competition, there's a reason why our teams are in the final stages. I think the Premier League is the reason for that.
Emma, you mentioned recent history at Anfield for Chelsea in particular. It's actually quite a positive one. Have a little look at this. Last 8 results, this is across all competitions, dating back to 2013 at Anfield. Chelsea are unbeaten. Now, when you look at that and you're a Chelsea fan, I imagine that'll go down quite well. What is it about Chelsea in general? They go to Anfield and get results.
I have absolutely no idea, to be honest. Like, why? I think, certain teams have those kind of grounds or an aura. I mean, if I look at some of the times that they've played there, they've been key matches. That one is a great example of the pressures was all on Liverpool at that moment, and Chelsea came in and played their game and did it. But I think it's very hard to pinpoint one reason why their success has been so good at Anfield.
No, absolutely. But there weren't any wins in there, I noticed, in all of that. So I think Chelsea will be concentrating on trying to win the game. I think the difference for Liverpool this time around, I'm sure Liverpool fans won't appreciate me saying this, but I think there is something as a saving grace to it. I think the luck is with Liverpool this year. And I think that if they continue, yes, they produce top performances, but take the Tottenham performance. I know some would argue that Van Dijk's defending in a 1v2 situation was outstanding, but they're getting goals in key moments. Yes, they're applying pressure, but it's going in the back of the net for them, and I feel that this is Liverpool's year.
All right, if they're going to do it, they have to beat these, or at least get good results out of these remaining fixtures. Let's have a little look at their run-in. Chelsea, of course, that we just mentioned at home this weekend. Then they go away to Cardiff. Then they've got Huddersfield at home, away to Newcastle, and the last game of the season in the Premier League is Wolves. And sandwiched in there, the 30th of April, is the semi-final in the Champions League, the first leg, if they beat Porto. And, of course, the second leg is before that on the 17th, and that is away. So it's actually can be quite congested, not as congested as Manchester City's. But when you look at those fixtures, do you think that actually they are all winnable games? Are there any games that you see them dropping points in?
No, I think they can win them all. I think it's a really good running for Liverpool. And, we were saying earlier about the impact of the Champions League is going to have on Manchester City and Liverpool. And what's more important to either club? I think it's a really interesting because, Liverpool have got a great history in the European Cup and have won it and made 2 finals quite recently and are fully established on the map as a top European club. But they haven't won a domestic title.
Well, you can see it in the fan base. Every time Liverpool score in the Premier League, the fans are willing them on to their first title. And I agree wholeheartedly. Man City's schedule is much tougher, I think, than Liverpool's. I think Liverpool will win their remaining Premier League games. And yes, they require Man City to drop points. But I think the Manchester derby will play a telling part in where the league title goes this year. And I think it will end up in Anfield. We're
going to come and have a little look at Manchester City's schedule in a moment. And like I said, it is extremely busy. But just going back to Liverpool for a second, and the players at the moment that are key to them winning games and doing so well in the Premier League this season. Henderson sometimes, he can get a rough ride from fans, actually. But what he's doing at the moment is quite significant. And going to Klopp and saying he wants to play a more advanced role. What did you think of that when that came out?
Well, I think that, from the outside, I think him and Klopp have had, a pretty interesting relationship. And I think that Henderson's in a position where if he feels a certain way, he's not shy in letting the manager know and vice versa. And it's been a little bit turbulent at times, not necessarily in an unhealthy way, but I think that they're quite openly might critique each other or you can see by their body language or how they gesture that they're not happy with something. But I think that's, that is also a part of introducing another defensive midfield player into the club as well, who's done very, very well in a holding midfield player. I can't remember his name now.
Fabinho.
And I think that to bring him in and be able to play that role is just allowing Henderson to maybe play a little bit higher up the pitch, and at times it's worked.
And especially playing to his strengths. He is a player that likes to arrive into the box late, and he's got the experience. He's certainly, I think, got the character to drive the team on. And personally, I think, and I hope not all my players are listening to this as I say this, but you want your players to be in a position to challenge you about certain things.
He's the captain.
Yeah,
he's the club captain.
He's driving the standards there, and if he thinks that's something that he can do that can drive his team towards winning, I think it's important to have that conversation with your manager. How you then manage that and play that out, that's open for conversation. And I think that the sort of the public sort of perception of what that relationship might be is just, for me, two purely passionate people who are trying to get Liverpool to the same point.
Do you have that often, players coming to you and suggesting that they'd want to play a slightly different role?
Well, I think sometimes you can get into conversations with them if they're unhappy about the role that they're playing, and they might they'll present a valid argument for that. And sometimes it's the other way around. They might come in and say, I've watched this game and I think the space to be exploited is here. I think it's important we do these things. But I think that two-way interaction is absolutely crucial, because the players play the game, and ultimately to carry out a game plan, they have to buy into that. To buy into that, they have to be a part of that. But you have to accept the reciprocal process that comes with that. You can't be dictatorial or authoritarian about it. But don't get me wrong, there'll be moments you say, shut up and just do the job I've asked you to do. But equally, I think you have to be open to the conversation.
But that is okay. That's not necessarily a negative thing. But, it's a high-pressure, intense environment. People are going to have crosswords. There's going to be a fallout from time to time. Yeah. It's just how you repair that. As long as you have respect for that person, I think that's what it comes down to. Whether or not you respect how they go about their job, who they are as a person, then you're free to air your views, how you feel it, as long as it's in a respectful...
And you've got to listen to the players. The players see and feel things from the pitch that are transferring information across the right, whether that's to get into an opponent's head, whether that's to exploit a weakness, whether that's to play to their strengths. That's all part of getting a team towards a win.
OK, let's focus on Manchester City then, and the damage potentially that was done losing in the Champions League to Spurs. Do you think there has been any damage, any lasting damage, or can they bounce back?
No, I think if out of all of their games, if you're going to lose one, that was the one. That was the one. It was an away match. It was 1-0, and they've got an opportunity to go home and turn it around. So it's not like losing a Premier League game. You can't get those points back. It's done. It's gone.
I think it's so difficult on the back of an FA Cup semi-final to play your strongest 11 again. Yes, there's 2 days. In fact, there's 2 days recovery. That's really tight to then go again, play in Tottenham's new stadium. And I agree with you, it's 2 legs. The tie isn't over. So if you're going to lose one of those 3 games against Spurs, you lose that one.
But what you said there, that is the story of Manchester City, the rest of Manchester City's season, though, isn't it? It is play a big game, rest 2 or 3 days. Play another big game, rest 2 or 3 days. That is literally
and if they win the quadruple, that will be the most unbelievable achievement to date, because of the lack of recovery in between. And they have the quality, no doubt, but it's the mental recovery. It's not just physical. You have to recover from the highs of winning or the lows of losing and get yourself going.
And it really is at this stage of the season where going so well in the League Cup really starts to hit them, because when they play Manchester United, I think Liverpool are on an 7 or an 8 day break. They don't have a midweek game that week, I think it is. And it's those little differences that are just massive at this stage of the season.
Do you want to have a look at their fixtures?
Yeah.
We'll see how busy it is going to get for Manchester City. So what we have on here is the Premier League fixtures. So this isn't even including Champions League and also the FA Cup final as well. So we go Palace away on the 14th, and then we go Spurs at home. This is the second leg of the Champions League in the quarter-final. Then 3 days later, it's Spurs at home again in the Premier League. And then 4 days later, it's Manchester United away, the Manchester United derby. And of course, last season, the last time this happened at the Etihad was when they almost won it at their own stadium, but Manchester United came out in the second half and beat them. Then we go 28th of April, 4 days later, it's Burnley away. We know can be really difficult. Then on Tuesday the 30th, just 2 days break between those two, it's the Champions League semi-final leg one, if they make it through to that one. Then on the 4th of May, it's Leicester at home. The 7th of May is the second semi-final of the Champions League, the second leg, if they make it through to that one. And then on the 12th of May, it's Brighton away, followed by the FA Cup final on the 19th of May, followed by the Champions League final on the 26th of May. So if they are going to go for the quadruple, that is how their schedule will look. And I tell you what, I'm breathless just saying it. I don't know how they're going to get through that. But like you say, they've got a big enough squad. They rotate a lot. And actually, on the subject of rotating, before we move on from this, we must talk about no Sano, no Kevin De Bruyne in the game against Spurs. And actually, for the first time in a long time, Pep got some criticism for that.
Well, I mean, the guy on the right wing's worth 50 or 60 million pounds. The guy inside
is he performing, Mahrez? Is he performing to the level that they would expect for 60 million?
You know, it's always difficult when you don't get a regular run in the team to get the type of performance that fans expect from players that do have a run in the side. I always think they draw the short straw. That being said, Sane and De Bruyne are 2 huge players. In fact, not just them two. For me, the bigger loss was Bernardo Silva midweek. I thought that was a significant loss to City. But you look at April 17th, Tottenham at home, play them again 3-4 days later. Let me tell you, playing the same team twice in 4 days, really, really tough. I know we've done it a lot with Man City. They often become real stalemates, so I think that's tricky to get a result. Oh, and then they've got to play the Manchester Derby. I think the season is going to be defined around those 3 results. And could they progress in the Champions League and lose to Manchester United in the league? I think, you know, that for me is the difficult conundrum. Though it's no foregone conclusion with the Champions League, regardless of the players left out, because Tottenham still have a 1-0 lead to defend.
Ilkay Gundogan had some interesting comments. He said that they weren't brave enough. They made a lot of simple mistakes. He talks about them being nervous in important Champions League games. And in reference to the Aguero penalty that was saved, he said that if they had scored that, it would have taken Tottenham apart. But it set them back too much, he thinks. He's very open and very honest there. Is that a slight insight into a team that actually we don't look at generally as being nervous in many situations at all?
Well, I think it boils down to this European thing, because, you know, as Liverpool are in the Premier League, I feel that Manchester City need a European title. They need a Champions League title to keep establish themselves and to keep building the club. And, you know, it's something that they haven't done. So all of a sudden, the pressure is a little bit more. It just ramps up a little bit, and the need and the desire to go and capture that trophy becomes more intense than ever. So I think that's what he's referring to.
But don't you think it's a little disrespectful to Tottenham and Pochettino and his tactics? Because I thought Spurs played 4 at the back with 3 in front, then a 2, then a 1, congested centrally, made it really, really difficult. They had 2 low liers in midfield, Man City, and they couldn't get the likes of David Silva into the game. Really, really struggled. I thought it was an outstanding performance, not just from Tottenham, but from Pochettino. And that's why I think it's no foregone conclusion, because Tottenham have an outstanding manager. And they're going to have to go there, not concede early, something Manchester City do very well, score goals early. And had the penalty gone in, yes, may have been a different outcome.
I think that's the key. The rest of it, for me, Spurs played a brilliant game.
Not scoring early, not scoring that opportunity.
That opportunity goes in, it completely it changes Spurs completely. You know, that they have to then assess themselves. Perhaps he would have tweaked something.
I've got to admit, I think Guardiola does get nervous around the Champions League. It's a competition he wants to win for his club. And do I think the team are a little cagier? Yes, I do. I think there is something that isn't. It is a different competition, and you think about, you know, Man City in the Premier League being a little more swashbuckling, and they'll commit numbers forward. They played with 2 low in midfield in this game, and it's very unlike him.
But you think he feels that about every club he's played for? Until he wins it, you think he has an edginess about him, or just because Manchester City haven't won it?
You know what? I can only say this: managing a team in this competition is so special, and it means so much, and you put a lot of energy into that. And so I think for him, one of the worst draws he could get, I think, was facing a Premier League team in this stage of the competition. I mean, they've got Porto or Ajax, we'd be talking about it differently. But I think he really respects Tottenham and Poch. Maybe too much so. But I also think they underplayed what it would be like going into that new stadium, because that's difficult for any team. And I think, you know, at the Etihad, it's a different story, different game, with their strongest players in the team. You know, I think that, you know, it'd be a different situation.
They've now got to go into a game this weekend against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. And although Crystal Palace aren't necessarily very strong at home this season, they are one of the few teams that managed to get something out of Manchester City. They beat them in the league this year. The last one before that was a draw as well. Which way do you see it going?
Well, I think the main reason why Crystal Palace are dangerous at the moment is because they're probably playing with a bit of freedom right now. Because, you know, their league season's near enough over. They're safe, really, and they're not going to push on and, you know, massively achieve anything above either. So it can go one or 2 ways. The players can either sign off a little bit, or they can play with total freedom and express themselves, and they'll want to do that. I think against Manchester City, they will want to show how good they are, and I think that can be a dangerous match for Manchester City.
OK, next up we're going to be speaking about the battle at the bottom and how the managers are coping with the pressure, including that man Neil Warnock.
We have to keep going. We have to do it again. And another one comes around Saturday, regardless of everyone's noise around it. It's another game, another chance to perform, another chance of 3 points.
We have to do our job on Friday, win the game, if we can, and then just we will try to go as high as we can.
Everybody around that bottom group of teams will be fighting, and our attitude has to be exactly that.
The sooner we get this last wins we need to have the 40 points, for example, the better it is.
It's a very up and down emotional run, and I'm sure in the last six games it's going to be exactly the same.
So there you go, pressure at the bottom of the table. You just heard from some of the managers there. Let's have a look at how it looks at the moment on the bottom half of the Premier League. And you can see Bournemouth are on 38, Burnley are on 36, Newcastle 7 points clear of the bottom three on 35, Brighton and Southampton both on 33 points, and they are 5 points clear of Cardiff with 28. So it's incredibly tight down there. It's a pivotal weekend as well. Let's have a little look at the fixtures, because this affects the table massively, or very much could do. So we start off with Leicester versus Newcastle, and that is our Friday night football game. Of course, you can see that on Sky Sports. And it's followed by Burnley versus Cardiff, potentially a 6-pointer there. Brighton are taking on Bournemouth, and Southampton are taking on Wolves. So you can see it's just popped up in front of your screen there. When we look at these guys, I mean, there's some important fixtures there. The one that screams to me actually is Burnley and Cardiff. What do we think of that one?
Well, I think it's a huge opportunity for Cardiff that they have to take. My only fear for Cardiff there is that, you know, the style and how Burnley play, they're very accustomed to that direct football and how they want to play, and I think they may actually even be better at it than what they are. And I think that's a tough fixture for them to have to win at this stage of the season.
But they have to.
They do.
You know, and I think knowing that that's what they have to do, sometimes that makes it easier. I don't think it will be pretty, to say the least, as I think it will be a fight for both sides. But Burnley have proved, I think, with adversity in a really, really tough season, after such a slow start, they're a team that have found their way in a difficult period, and I think it will be a home win at the weekend.
What about Southampton against Wolves? Because the introduction of Ralph Hasenhüttl seems to have changed Southampton's outlook and stabilised them somewhat. A difficult game, though, against Wolves, who are potentially chasing 7th.
Wolves are in brilliant form. They're great to watch. They're playing with, you know, total freedom, and they look like they're really enjoying their football. And I have to say that Southampton are too, given the position they're in. I think that's the biggest thing that Hasenhüttl's brought to Southampton. I think he's got a group of players that are on board with what he wants to do. He's got them a bit fitter. They're playing with a higher intensity, and I think, you know, the psychology that he's brought to the club I've really liked, because he's almost, well, he invited the players on a journey, the first press conference that he signed at the club, and he made no disguise about what it was going to be, and I think he's got the best out of the group that he had, and he's got rid of players, you know, their transfer window, to move on players that weren't going to be on board, or what he felt weren't going to be on board with his plans.
They're fighting.
Exactly.
Because they looked massively, in trouble.
Yes.
At some point. But he's been able to instill that mentality that we've seen Klopp do, you know, in a very similar fashion. He's got the fans behind the way of playing, and I think there's an aggression to them at St Mary's that makes him difficult.
You're right, because he's had some setbacks as well, because I think they lost to Cardiff at home. I think it was Cardiff in the last minute they lost to at home, and it was like a real hammer blow, because everything had been going well. So, you know, they've had to bounce back a couple of times, but you know, he's got them in a good place, and, you know, I think they can beat Wolves at home.
OK, so we have been asking for you to get involved as well, and you can tweet us at Sky Sports PL, and you have done, and here's a couple that we want to read out. This one's from LLX, and he says, if Manchester City win the quadruple, would it be a bigger achievement than Leicester winning the league?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's I don't know what the odds are for a team to win a quadruple, and I'm sure they probably aren't as steep, or I don't know how great they are compared to Leicester winning the Premier League, but the fact they have to do it with sometimes 2 days, sometimes 3 days recovery for a really, really long period would be a significant achievement.
Do you agree?
Yes, definitely bigger. Definitely bigger. To achieve that in the Premier League, I think is the key. You know, you see,
even with the squad and the investment that they've had, just playing devil's advocate.
It doesn't make any difference, because you're competing against other teams that have great squads and great resources.
And sometimes that makes it harder, because keeping a team is an easy option, staying with the same side. Changing and rotating players disrupts some degree of rhythm. So to keep winning and compete for a quadruple, I think it's an outstanding achievement if that happens.
OK, let's take this one then. This is from Dan Roberts, and he says, how close are the likes of Wolves, Watford, Leicester, etc., into breaking into the top 6 next season, and do you think any of them will?
I think it's very, very hard for those clubs. I think, this best of the rest, 7th in the Premier League table, it could start to be a real feature. It would be a shame if it did, because I like to see other teams challenging and being in that top 4 spots, maybe even. But for them to establish themselves as top 6 clubs, I think with the ones we have.
There's 2 parts to that. If one of them qualify for European competition, then they add something else to that. The second part is second seasons. Once teams, understand personnel a little bit better and you figure teams out, you play against them a little bit differently. So how are they going to adapt to that? That what's worked from this year won't necessarily work from next year.
You also look at Burnley as well.
It's a good example.
Everything in the Europa League and then a really tough Premier League season because of it.
Yeah, excellent. Guys, thank you so much. There's loads more to look forward to on Sky Sports. Have a little look at this. Lots of football this weekend. And it all kicks off on Friday night. We mentioned it earlier on. It's Leicester taking on Newcastle, and that kicks off at 7 p.m. You can tune into that one. All of these on the Sky Sports Premier League channel. On Saturday, it's Tottenham taking on Huddersfield, and then a Super Sunday featuring Crystal Palace against Manchester City. And then Liverpool versus Chelsea, a big one there. And then on Monday Night Football, it's Watford taking on Arsenal, and that is from 7 p.m. on the Sky Sports Premier League channel. Not only that, on Tuesday, the debate is returning. You can tune in from 10 o'clock, just as you have done tonight on the Sky Sports Premier League channel. Emma, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Excellent debate. Very much enjoyed your company, and we will see you again soon. And thank you very much for watching. See you.
Sky Sports Premier League.